name is Kate Driver. I'm the Director of School Counseling here at AMSA. Welcome to Junior College Night. This is our second year, I think, doing this on Zoom. And so we're glad that you could all join us, whether you're joining us live or you are watching this recorded after the fact. Thank you so much for being here. Do you want me to take this one, Sarah?
I probably should have, do you want us to all introduce ourselves before we
sure.
Jump right in? All right, so I'll start. My name is Sarah Morrissey. I have students in the alphabet PL to the end. So I'm the tail end of the alphabet. I've been at AMSA for 7 years now, so I've worked with a number of students throughout the years, and it's been fun seeing students and their siblings come through AMSA. I'm really excited to work with everybody. I have a background before school counseling, working on the admissions side, so this is a piece to the job that I really enjoy and really love. So please seek us out as resources. We all have a lot of different strengths and different backgrounds that we come from, so we're really looking forward to working with your juniors.
I can jump in, I guess, and kind of on the opposite end of that, actually. I have the beginning of the alphabet. My name is Chris Dugan. This is my first full year here at AMSA. I started back in January. So I believe most of your students are new to me. I had juniors and seniors last year, and so the juniors this year are new to me. I know I've met a handful of you, and some of you I'm sure I will meet shortly. I'm excited to. So again, A through E is my part of the alphabet, and I will hand off to one of my colleagues.
I can go next. I am Lindsay Corallo, and I am the letters F through L. I am new to AMSA this year, joining from another public charter school for about a decade that I worked there in Fitchburg, and really excited to work with you and your students. F through L. Thank you.
And my name is Wiley Culhane. This is my 8th year at AMSA. And I'm really looking forward to working with this junior class. I have worked with them for the past few years. The students in my caseload this year have a last name with the letters M through PI.
Awesome.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Steph Bates. I am the school counseling intern for this year. I'm in my final year of my school counseling grad program at Assumption and really excited to be interning at AMSA this year. I'm working primarily with Sarah Morrissey.
So we'll jump right in. I'm going to just move this out of the way. Okay. So our college counseling mission as a department is to help each student identify, apply, and matriculate to colleges that fit their interests, abilities, and goals. We value the relationship between students and counselors and strive to know all students well so we can best advise them and help them to reach their post-secondary goals. Our goal really as a department is to meet the needs of the students and where they're at throughout the process, as well as what they're planning to do after graduation. So you'll hear us often talk about, although a large population of our students go on to either 2 or 4-year colleges, we do want to make sure that we are servicing all of our students and helping them to explore all of the options that there are after graduation. So although college is a big focus of what we do during the junior and senior year, we know that it's not for everybody, and we want to make sure that we're providing the help and the service that students need in order to help them achieve whatever goals they may have. So whether that's a gap year, going into the military, going right into the working force, delaying college for a year or 2, we want to make sure that we meet students where they're at and help them to achieve whatever goals that they have. So on tonight's agenda, we will go through the planning and research process of the college process. A majority of this will be focused on the actual college piece itself. But again, like I said, if college is not the option, there are other times that we will talk about to students about those procedures. So planning and research, the application overview, so what are the parts of the application, and then just navigating the actual process of the college search. Just some future events to keep an eye out for is we are going to run an SAT and ACT for Families Night. One of us will be a co-host of it, but it will be run by an outside college counselor that has done a lot of research on SAT and ACT and how colleges are looking at that currently in these COVID times. Then we'll be doing a workshop again on college recruiting. That's to be determined or to be announced shortly. And then in the springtime, in May, we will do kind of the second half of this presentation, which is the actual concrete application process, and then also have 4 to 5 admissions counselors join us to have an admissions panel. So they'll provide some information about the college-scape right now and allow students and parents to ask questions of them. Next, the other 2 things that we always offer families are the college financing will happen in the fall of next year, as well as a coffee with the counselors. We found over the last couple of years, we've done it via Zoom, and it gives you a chance to ask questions about, in addition to what we're doing in senior seminar, whatever questions you may have about the college search process that maybe your student isn't necessarily communicating back to you at home. So it gives a little bit of face time with us as counselors as a group and a little bit more informal rather than a formal presentation. So one of the questions that we get a lot is, how has this pandemic, how has COVID changed the college admissions process? There have been some benefits to it, although it has made it challenging in some respects. There's lots more schools that have gone test optional over the last 2 years, and as each cycle starts, we start to hear from colleges saying that they're going to continue their test optional policy. So this is great for us because we know that all students test well. More colleges are jumping on that bandwagon of going test optional. So students have the option that if they are good test takers, they can submit their test scores to those schools. If they don't want them considered as part of the process, then they wouldn't be considered as part of the process. So it provides a more holistic review of the application for the colleges. So that emphasis on the total application and that holistic view has really increased over the last couple of years. It's not just about the data or the numbers. They're looking at the application as a whole. There's also way more online events and online opportunities for students and parents and families to take advantage of. There's more flexibility around deadlines in some cases. So colleges are more open-minded and more flexible than they've ever been before because they've kind of had to change the way they've done things for years and years, just like we're all adjusting and changing to the way things are now. Colleges are doing the same thing on their end. There has been a higher demand for financial aid, so submitting your FAFSAs and CSS profile and all of those financial documentation is really important. And then it's never too early to start looking for scholarships. So there's lots of scholarship opportunities. We do a whole lesson with students in the fall of their senior year about looking for scholarships, but if students are interested in that now, there are some scholarships out there for juniors. So we would encourage you to jump on Naviance and start looking for those if you know that the financial need is going to be greater for your student. There's many options for students and families to interact with schools online. There's student to student opportunities. So, meeting with other college students or meeting with college students that go to that particular school. There's information sessions, there's tours, there's just lots of different virtual options that some schools had before this pandemic, but most schools have really had to beef up what they offer, which is great because it allows you to see more schools, especially for those schools that are further away, that it's harder to get to. You have to get on a plane to actually travel to see some schools. This makes it more accessible to students. We also have, we've seen over the last couple of years, an increase in number of applications per student. So 3 or 4 years ago, we were seeing an average of 6 to 10. Now we're seeing closer to that 9 to 10 is an average number that students are applying. So there are students applying to more schools, which means just overall the application numbers are higher at each individual school. Your timeline from now until next year, just kind of a very basic timeline. We'll give you one that's a lot more in depth towards the end of the presentation, but during the junior year, there really should be a focus on the research. So looking at schools in depth, seeing not only what they offer for majors, but what's the atmosphere like? What do they offer for extracurriculars? All of that will be done in the spring of your junior year. We also encourage students to start taking the SATs and ACTs winter, spring of junior year. Then you'll apply in the fall and the winter of next year, and then make your decision in spring of senior year. And I'm going to turn it over.
All right, so Ms. Culhane and I are going to talk about planning and research and where students should be starting. Next slide, Ms. Morrissey. All right. Ms. Culhane, you're muted.
Hi, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to talk about finding your fit and things that you need to start thinking about when considering college. A good place to start is to think about location. Students it's never too early to start thinking about what type of area you might like to spend 4 years of your life in. So whether that be an urban area or a more rural setting, whether it's closer to home or further away. But all of that stuff is really important to consider. The proximity to home, the feasibility of visiting home or having people visit you, and everything that goes along with that. So location is definitely a good place to start when you're thinking about what type of colleges might suit your interests. Likewise, whether you're interested in a larger university or a small college. A large university is usually considered a college that has maybe 15,000 or more students in it, whereas a small university may have 5,000 or less, and medium is somewhere in the middle of that. With each type of campus, you're going to find a different vibe, a different feel. Obviously, in a larger college, you might have more lecture-style classrooms. There might be more state-of-the-art facilities, a lot of different activities to get involved in, well-funded athletic programs, things of that nature. The flip side of that is that you may receive less individual attention from professors. It may be harder to achieve leadership roles on campus, whereas that might be easier in a smaller college where there's more, there's less students, so there's more ability to connect with your professors and to get involved in some of those leadership activities. Lecture halls versus small classes. Our students are accustomed to smaller classes in high school, but when you move on to college, sometimes students are going to be in lecture halls where they're in class with 100 or more students, and it's a very different feel, but it's something that students should be aware of when researching college and visiting college campuses. What type of classes are you going to be participating in as a student on campus? Student organizations, another thing to consider. I think that, student life is equally as important as your academic life. So you want to make sure the college that you're, attending has the opportunities to get involved and has the organizations and clubs and activities that you enjoy or that you think you'll enjoy moving forward. You're going to be spending a lot of time here. So you want to make sure that your student life opportunities are considered as well as your academic fit. Affordability, I think that that's something that most families need to consider when researching college. And I think that that is something that should be discussed as a family, and that students should be involved in that process to understand, how much this education is going to cost and what is that going to look like? What's that going to mean for me when I graduate from college? Am I going to have a lot of loans? What is the difference between going to, the tuition at a state school versus a private school maybe? All of these things are important for students to understand and investigate with their families. And then lastly, academic fit. Obviously, this is an important piece. I think it's important for students to look for classes, programs, and learning opportunities that match their interests. They can consider things like learning style and also whether or not they have a clear idea of what they'd even like to study in college at this point. Most of our students will be leaving for college when they're 18 years old, and they may not have a clear idea of what they want to study. So maybe a larger university is a better idea where there's a lot of different options to choose from. So those are all things to consider. Also, I think it's important for students to look for a strong academic match for them. So to take a look at the classes they've taken in high school, the grades they've earned, and compare those stats against those of the most recent incoming class to see how they measure up. Okay. Unwise reasons to add a school to your list. So just as, it's important to consider important reasons why you're choosing the schools that you're interested in looking at. Oftentimes, students, there are reasons that they consider that might be unwise. For example, where your boyfriend or girlfriend goes to school, where all of your friends are applying. It's important. We know that students want to remain connected to these relationships, and we want that for them as well. But that does not mean that you have to follow someone to college. Okay, you're making an investment in your future and what you want to study and pursue. And college is an awesome opportunity to branch out and meet new people. And it doesn't mean that you have to say goodbye to your old friends or your old relationships. But you want to be in an environment that's best suited for you. The name of the school, I think that this is something that a lot of people get caught up in from time to time. There are thousands and thousands of different colleges across this country and across the world that you can choose from. And the fit is so important. It's really not about the name, but more about the fit. And we really believe that there is a school for everyone, so it's important to take a look at all sorts of different schools in different areas, maybe different price ranges. But there's a lot of schools to take a look at, and some of them may not have that notorious name. They're not all going to be Harvard, and they shouldn't all be Harvard. Should take a look at some of the lesser known schools and see what they have to offer. And then lastly, another unwise reason to add a school to your list is just because the acceptance rate is high. Of course, unless you're actually interested in the school. Okay. College visits. This is an important piece, a very important piece of the whole process, okay? With assigned college visit forms, students have 4 excused college visits per year for 11th and 12th grade. And we really encourage you to use those opportunities to go and take a look at some college campuses. I can't stress how important it is to take a look at these campuses and get a feel for what student life is like on campus. It's important to visit when students will be on campus. In other words, while it might be convenient for you to go and take a look at some of these colleges over the holiday break, if students aren't going to be on campus, you're not going to get a great sense of what life is like there. Sure, you're going to be able to see the buildings and some of the facilities, but you really want to get the pulse on what it's like to be a student there. And I think visiting while students are on campus is really important. Use college websites for schedule of tours and information sessions. Ms. Morrissey talked about that a little bit earlier in the evening. There's a lot of opportunities now that are virtual. I think more are opening up in person, which is good. Check in with the admissions office while you're on campus. Let them know that you're interested. You know, it's always good to meet someone in that office and make a connection. These are people that you might end up having interviews with later on in the process. Sit in on classes and go to lunch with students if you can arrange to do that. You know, you can check in with the admissions office and see if that is a possibility, or if you know someone who goes to the school, see if you can sit in on a class or go to lunch with someone to get a feel for what that campus life is like. It's also very important to revisit schools after acceptances have been received. Most colleges will have an Accepted Students Day, and this is a college's opportunity to kind of show off what they have to offer. And they're going to want to kind of lure you in and you know, so that you choose their school. It's important to visit the campuses where you've been accepted, if at all possible, so that you have an idea about, you know, take a look around, look at the other students that you're, you know, meet some of the students that you that have also been accepted, get a sense for what life is like on campus one more time before making that decision. You can check in with campus safety and do a self-guided tour at times as well. And you can also check in, there might be discounts at local hotels, inns, etc., if you are traveling from a distance to visit a college. Other opportunities include online information sessions. We have had some colleges that have had visits with us virtually at AMSA that students can take advantage of. Open houses on campus. You know, you can visit college websites and see what they have to offer. Online college fairs are a good way to get some additional information about some colleges that might be of interest to you. Same with student panels and meeting faculty. Those are all opportunities that you might be able to research on college websites that you're interested in learning more about. And then, of course, online tours. As Ms. Morrissey mentioned, most of these colleges have really kind of beefed up their virtual options. So taking an online tour is a great first step to learning more about some of the colleges that are out there.
Awesome. So while you're evaluating colleges, it's really important to pay attention to how you feel on campus. Are you comfortable? How is the setting? And, you know, it's also good to think about like what's happening with the weather. And I had a student that went and visited a college and it was rainy and really crummy, and they were like, oh, I didn't like it. And then they went back on a sunny day and they loved it. So, you know, look at what's going on around you, but think about, do you feel comfortable there? Speak to current students if you can. I think it's also wonderful to try to meet a faculty member in the major that you're interested in, if that's possible. If it's possible to sit in on a class, that's great. Ms. Colhane mentioned that. And spending some time off the tour. So where's the student center? If you can go and have a cup of coffee there and just see like what's going on, I think it can give you a great insight into, are students hanging out on campus, or does campus empty out at 3 o'clock because most of the students are commuters? You might feel differently about that if you're commuting or not. So spending a little time not on the official campus tour is a really wonderful idea. We also encourage students to be open-minded. They may find themselves surprised that they like a certain place more than they thought they would, or vice versa. But being open-minded can make this a lot more fun. Next slide. As Ms. Culhane mentioned, we have college reps that visit AMSA. They've been visiting online this fall. We will hopefully have some spring visits as well, and we'll have plenty of folks that come back in the fall. I don't know if the fall will be in person or virtual, but students sign up in Naviance. It's really a great opportunity when we're doing them to get in front of an admissions rep who actually may be the one reviewing your application. So whether you're at a college fair or interfacing with someone in the admissions office, it's always good to remember that that might actually be the person who's reading your application. And so any personal connections that you can make are very, very important. So one of the big things that many students are working on right now, and students are in a variety of places with this process. So some students are just starting, others have already been working on their college list. This is really, I think, the task of junior spring is to firm up a college list. We definitely recommend that students stay very organized and they're strategic as they build a list. We have a tool that we suggest that you can use to build your list, and I'll put that in the chat near the end of the session so you can go to the link and download it. We really want to see balanced college lists. So what that means is that students have a variety of different types of schools on their list. So what we would consider a probable school, or a probable admission or probable school for a student, is where the data about them, their GPA, the rigor of their high school transcript, a couple of things I'll talk about in a minute, really are above that of the average admitted student. That would be a probable school. Target schools are where a student's credentials meet just about the average admitted student. A reach or a far reach are really places where your student's academic profile doesn't quite meet that of the average admitted student. So there's a chance that a student might get in, but it's not necessarily super likely. I think one thing that's important to note, though, is that, and I think this may be on one of my slides later, so I may be repeating myself, or I may come back to that in a moment, but any school that accepts less than, I would say, about 40% of their applicants, regardless of whether or not a student's credentials look the same as that of an average admitted student, means that school is a reach school. It's hard to get into. And sometimes when I hear things like, oh, well, Northeastern's a target school for me. Well, I love all our kids. And we have a great history with Northeastern, but it's very difficult to get into. And so while your credentials might meet that of the average admitted student, so do many of the other people applying. And so when you look at the admit rate, it sort of changes that equation a little bit. It's really important that your list as a student fits your needs and is based on your academic and financial profile. So a school that is a probable or a target school for one student may be very different than another student based on the information about them and the application that they'll be putting together. Next, please. So the data to use to decide which schools are probable, target, reach, or far reach are here. And students have access to a lot of this information already. So the student's GPA, the selectivity of the program. If a student is at some schools, look at all of their applicants together. Some schools actually review by program or admit students into a certain program or major. So it's important to know how your student will be reviewed and then how difficult is that program to get into if students are being reviewed by program. So typically, like a lot of our engineering majors, you're often admitted into an engineering major or engineering program, and that may be more difficult to get into than to get into a different major or generally into the college or university. So looking at that program information can be important. The rigor of the student's transcript. So that means not just how well students did, but what did they take advantage of based on what was available to them in high school. So did they take some honors classes, some AP classes? Did they challenge themselves from time to time? That is what a lot of schools would like to see. Some students may be submitting test scores. As Mrs. Morrissey mentioned, many schools continue to be test optional. There are lots of schools in this country that have a long history of being test optional. Bates College in Maine has not accepted test scores in a very, very long time. And they're one of the top liberal arts schools in the country. Now, because of COVID, there are more schools that have had to figure out how to admit students without test scores. And so I think that I've been telling juniors as we're seeing them this week to begin talking about junior seminar that's coming up in January. They're in a really advantageous position. If they feel like their test scores are helpful, many times they'll get to choose if they want to submit them or not. And if test taking isn't your thing, there are lots of test optional options and more than ever before. So again, this last piece, I touched on this before, even if your data matches those of the average accepted student, if the admit rate of the school, the general admit rate, is below 40%, then it's a reach for everyone, and that's okay. We just want to be really clear about that so that students know that they're going to have a lot of options when it comes time to make some decisions in March, April, and May, May 1st of their senior year. We can go on. All right, so tools that students can use to figure all this out, because it may seem a little complicated. We have Naviance, and we're actually, I would say 3/4 of the junior class have spent sometime over the last day or two with me, making sure that they can get into their Naviance account and their College Board account, which is awesome. There is a college super match. It's basically a database where students put in search criteria and then they get a list of schools that match their search terms. So that's a really wonderful way to start looking at their list. We have scattergrams that show historical data from AMSA based on, or there's information about using GPA and test scores, were students admitted or waitlisted or denied at certain schools. I don't put a ton of stock into that. I think it's a helpful tool, but it's certainly not something that students should be like zeroing in on as telling them what's going to happen. Every admission cycle is different. Every student is different, but it's a good place to look. I also recommend the College Board website. They have a great search tool that is similar to College Supermatch, but they also have some really great data about average test scores and average GPAs of students who are admitted to all different colleges. So there's some great stuff on College Board. The New England Board of Higher Education has a tuition break program for Massachusetts residents. So for students who are looking to major in something that isn't offered at our fantastic public college and university system, students can go to other schools in New England for a discounted rate. One of the things that's tricky about this is that if students change their major from that initial major, then they're on the hook for more tuition. So this is really only if you're like, I am majoring in something super obscure that I can't find in this state, then the New England Board of Higher Education program would be good for you. I used to work in Maine, and so we didn't have as many options in Maine. So a lot of my Maine kids could go to like UNH or UMass for less money, but it doesn't quite work as well the other way. But I will pop that link in the chat in just a couple of minutes when we go to the next section so that you can take a look at that. We also recommend using net price calculators to begin to figure out what kinds of financial aid offers that you'll get at different colleges and universities. Every college and university is required by law to have a net price calculator on their website. Some are better than others. You can definitely use the College Board, like general one, to just get a ballpark of like, what are we looking at here? And then start to play with individual schools' net price calculators to figure out what kind of aid you may eventually qualify for. So Cost in the college search, I think we talk more about cost every year. We hosted an event a couple of weeks ago with a financial aid expert and Mindy Pop, who has done some subbing at AMSA, focused really on college financing, and we'll do that again next fall. It was a good event. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to, and they were not comfortable with that. But just a couple of quick terms that I think it's important that you think about as you are beginning to plan for the application process. So you plug all your information into these financial aid forms. Then there's going to be a number that the government and or a college thinks that you need. Whether you and I think that that's what you need in terms of financial aid, that's a totally different conversation. But a student you may have, once you filled out this information, you may get a number that says, we think that this family can put $10,000 toward college. We look at the cost of attendance minus that family contribution, that equals the need. And colleges do their best to put together financial aid packages that meet that need. Some do a better job than others, but I think sometimes we think like, okay, well, the state school is going to be cheaper 100% of the time. And that's not necessarily the case. So there are some schools that offer need-based aid. Most schools offer, or basically all schools offer some need-based aid. That is based purely on your finances. How many people are in your family? How many are going to be in college? What's your income? That's basically it. There's a little more to it, but not a lot. Then there are schools that offer merit-based aid. This is an aid award that a student might get because they have a certain GPA or a certain test score. The merit-based aid, it's good to know if a school offers merit-based aid. Not every school does. So if you're somebody who thinks that your family may not qualify for a lot of need-based aid, you would be best served to look at some schools that offer merit-based aid to try to get some of those tuition discounts, that free money that's going to help make some of those schools more affordable for you. You'll see some public schools and some private schools. We definitely recommend applying to at least one in-state public school so that you have an option within our state where all your fantastic tax dollars have been supplementing the education of many students for the time that you lived in Massachusetts. We often see that the sticker price of a private school is higher, much, much higher than a public school. But that doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. And so it is important to dig into some of those net price calculators and see what kind of a deal you might get. For some families, sometimes a private school comes up with a better financial aid package and it ends up being less expensive than going to the state school. It really depends, but it's good to do some research now and figure out what you might get eventually so that you can build in smart financial options in the college list so that you don't end up on the other side of it saying, wow, we can't afford any of these places. Now what do we do? Because that's not a great place to be in. Okay. So in the session a couple of weeks ago, our friend Mindy said something that really resonated with me. Our students can be successful in a variety of environments. What determines success is the student and their choices. We are so lucky. We have such a fantastic group of students, a fantastic group of parents and families supporting those students. And we're really lucky because there are many, many places that they will be successful. What that really means is that we want to find places where your students are going to thrive, and that may not necessarily be the college that they think it's going to be right now, okay? We want you to think realistically about your students' level of academic achievement and your ability to pay for college during the search process so that come next spring, you have options and you get to say, wow, look at these great places. Where am I going to thrive and what can we afford? You have to take the long view of some of this. Many of your students are probably going to be looking at grad school because they're fantastic and smart. And so you may want to think about, like, how are we going to be able to afford that long-term goal of an education, possibly up to a PhD, as some of our students aspire to. All right. I wrote my biggest piece of advice, and then I wrote you 2 pieces of advice. It's been kind of a day. So I think it's really important not to fall in love with one school. I say that because when it comes down to it, sometimes the finances can get in the way. And if your student has fallen in love with one place, you know, we always want to make our kids happy. And so sometimes we can fall into a financial trap that maybe we wouldn't have fallen into if we didn't get so attached to one particular outcome. So don't fall in love with one place, fall in love with a few places. Find a probable school that you actually like. Like my best days are when I help a student find a school that we're pretty sure they're going to get into that they're psyched about. That is so nice, because then if they get into other places that they really love that are a reach, that's fantastic. But we know that we have a place that they can see themselves being happy. They like the opportunities in front of them, and they're pretty sure they're going to get in. It just takes the pressure way down. So those are my happy days, when I help a student find a probable school they're excited about. And I think that's all from me. All right, so I'm going to pop a couple links in the chat. We also have a book recommendation, or a section of book recommendations on the packet you'll get in a little bit. We also have a great guide that some of us use called Rug's Guide to the Recommendations. You don't necessarily have to buy a copy, but it has a wonderful list of places by major that are recommended. So if you're like, I want to be a psychology major, here are 60 places that have good psychology programs, well-rated psychology programs. So we have a resource that we're happy to share with students as they build these lists.
Nice, wonderful. So I'm going to talk, Ms. Bates and I are going to talk a little bit about just the application overview and the different pieces of the application. All right, so your pieces of the application, there'll be the actual application form itself. For many of our students, this will be utilizing the Common App. Although there are some schools that utilize, say, the Coalition app, or they may have their own institutional application that they use. But regardless, it will probably be, if it's not strictly just Common App, it'll be a combination of those 3. Then as part of that application, there's a general essay question. Common App gives students 7 to 8 different essay prompts that they can pick from to write their essay on. It's a max of 650 words. Typically, prompts are released in the spring of the student's junior year, so you'll have between the information that we go over in junior seminar, as well as supplemental opportunities that we give students typically over the summer to participate in. Students should really come into senior year having a working draft of that essay. The other essay piece that comes along with applications are the supplemental essays or questions. Those are put out by the individual colleges themselves. So while the general application only has 1 essay, some colleges have additional essays and questions that they ask students. Those can be as simple as just wanting to know major and preference locations of which campus they want to be on, or the other extreme would be 10 additional supplemental essays that a student has to write. So it's important as students are going through the process and approaching senior year that they're looking to see not only that they have to write the initial essay, but what other additional supplemental essays and questions will a college be asking them that they'll have to prepare for and write as part of their application. The other pieces are the letter of recommendation, both from the teachers as well as counselors. And we'll talk a little bit about those in detail soon in the upcoming slides. And then there's also the transcript that will be your final grades from 9, 10, and 11, and then we'll release grades in a transcript to colleges throughout the process. So at the end of first term, as well as mid-year, and then typically we only send a final transcript out at the end of the process once you've decided where you're going. The AMSA profile has all of that statistical data and information about AMSA as a school, along with the structure of our math program. And if you wanted to see a copy of that and kind of read for yourself, that is located on our website. Test scores, if the school requires test scores, that will be a piece of the application. If they're test optional, you may or may not be submitting them to individual schools, or some schools may require them, some you may not be submitting to. And then the interview. This is going to be an optional piece. We always suggest to students, if a school reaches out to them and asks them to partake in an interview, that they should absolutely say yes and take advantage of those opportunities. But it's not required that it's a must-do for every single school. But if they are given the opportunity, we would say to take advantage of that opportunity to do an interview. So the testing piece, which we talked a little bit about earlier, and it's been mentioned. So the SAT and ACT can be used interchangeably. So students can opt to take one versus the other. We have a good amount of students that take both at least once, and then decide whichever test they test better on, they'll utilize those scores to submit to schools, or they'll retake the exam again to increase their scores for one particular test. But all schools, if they want test scores, will take either or. Students should start testing in the spring of their junior year. I know some of you are probably already registered for or just took the December exam, but for the most part, we encourage students to take it at least once in the spring of their junior year. Ideally, to have testing wrapped up by the end of junior year, so that way you're not stressing over it in the fall of senior year with everything else that you need to do for the application process. But it has been, in the last couple of years, they have added some summer test dates, which has been helpful for students that are in that rat race at the end of junior year and just want to get one more test in, but don't want to do it in September. There have been some July and August dates added for both SAT and ACT. For those of you that have older students or remember that SAT used to have a subject test, those no longer exist. So they did away with those this past year. So students no longer have to worry about taking those additional exams as part of the application process. So those are gone, as well as the essay portion. Students no longer have to take an essay portion with SAT or ACT. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bates.
So most colleges require 2 teacher recommendations, letters of recommendation. We suggest asking 1 teacher in humanities, so English, history, or the arts, and then 1 in the math or sciences. These teachers should be high school teachers, not middle school teachers, and preferably someone who was your junior teacher, possibly a senior teacher next year. And you typically ask for these, the student typically asks for these in the springtime, and they can be asked either in person or by email. And when you get the okay from the teacher, you can then fill out the recommendation request form in Naviance. The letters are typically focused on your academic performance, and now is the time to start building your relationship with the teachers in order to feel comfortable asking the teacher. And also it helps the teacher write the best possible recommendation letter for your student. And then after they write your letter, the student should make sure that they write a thank you note for that teacher. Everyone who applies to college typically has a counselor letter of recommendation, and in order to do that, you need to complete the counselor recommendation questionnaire in Naviance, which will open in January. From there, you'll complete your junior meeting, where the student sets up a meeting with their counselor and goes over a few small details about colleges and the application and what they're looking for on their list. We also ask that the families and caregivers fill out the family questionnaire, and that is open now for you to do. It just focuses on the academics, the co-curriculars, the community involvement, personal characteristics that we might not know from knowing your students, but you know your students best, so it's great information. The other thing that we ask is if you need a letter for a summer internship, if you can ask the counselors 1 month before that deadline. Next, we have transcripts. So those will go over the grades from every class that your student has taken from grades 9, 10, and 11. They will be also sent out after the first quarter, as well as a mid-year. The GPA will be on there, and it is weighted out of a 5.0 scale. And some colleges may recalculate their own GPA based on different classes that they do to do their GPA and their own specifications. It will also list the level of the classes, so whether that's a CP class, honors, AP, accelerated, as well as the AMSA school profile that will be sent, which Ms. Morrissey talked a little bit about earlier. Kind of provides a little context for your students' transcripts, and it's always available online on the AMSA website if you're ever interested in looking at that. And we also do not provide rank in our transcripts. There are some different types of deadlines. So early decision is the one that is binding. So what that means is that if you apply early decision and you're accepted, then your student has to go to that college or university. You have to sign a contract, and the counselor sign a contract to let them know that your student knows that they have to go to the institution. And this means that you have to do your homework, make sure that not only is it a good academic fit, it's also a good social fit, as well as a financial fit. So you should make sure that you do your cost calculator and have a strong idea of what that financial package will include, and that you feel comfortable making that decision. There is a restrictive early action, which is typically for private schools, that it's not binding, but it does limit the amount of applications you can apply to early. There's early action, which is you can apply to a number of different schools, and you can also find out early as one of the benefits. Typically, those are done in November and December. Then there are rolling applications where you can apply at any time, and the decision will be in 6 to 8 weeks. Regular decision is just applying typically in January or February, and then your application is reviewed with the entire applicant pool, and then your decision is typically found out around March. And then there are priority deadlines, which kind of go along with the merit-based need that we talked about earlier.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about navigating the process now that you've had a ton of information. Hopefully not everybody is on information overload yet. We have a little bit more for you. Just a little bit of a review as well, and kind of navigating the process for applications, especially specifically to AMSA. So we're working as a team with your students. Your students are the drivers. They're the ones who are really, really driving this process, and should be doing so in the driver's seat with our support as a school counselors and with families as well. You are absolutely a huge part of this process with them, but they're the ones who are really going to be leading the charge. So we want to, as families, you can really support and empower your students to be the ones to be in the driver's seat, and meeting them where they're at, wherever your students are in the process right now, as far as, you know, where, if they've started to look at those colleges, if they're just beginning that, if they've got a tentative list already started, seeing where your students are at and meeting them there and helping them along the way. keeping in mind with some of what we talked about as far as the different types of schools and having a range of schools that your students are applying to, thinking about setting reasonable expectations. What's going to make the most sense for your student and their timelines for applications and the type of schools that they're going to be applying to, and really thinking about your students specifically and not necessarily thinking about what their peers are doing, really thinking about your students. The student should own the process. So when it comes to communicating directly with colleges, getting in touch with admissions reps, setting up interviews, reaching out to set up meetings with their school counselors, they should be the ones who are doing these. Especially when it comes to getting in touch with colleges and admissions counselors, the colleges want to hear directly from the student, not necessarily from the parent or guardian. This is another level of showing that the student is ready for college and is at that level of independence to be able to do that. You can absolutely support them, coach them, practice with them, making some of these phone calls, because it can be awkward if it's the first time that they've had a phone conversation or sending an email. You can reread it for them, edit it, but they're the ones who should be the ones communicating. As far as writing essays and filling out applications, again, that's going to be your student who's doing that piece. We want to hear their voices when they're writing to colleges and they're putting in their information. They can absolutely get their work edited either by an English teacher, by you as their parent or guardian, by us as the counselor, but they're the ones who need to be in the driver's seat of writing those essays and applications as well. And it's really important that through some of this process that they're staying in communications with us as the counselor. And, when we have meetings with them, we're more than happy to meet with you as well, but it's important that the students are driving that and are leading those conversations and setting up those meetings. And as far as how families can help, like I said before, even though your student's the one driving that car, you're still in it. You're still a huge part of this process. So please be in the loop about things. And we're going to give you some ideas about how you can be in the loop and make sure that you're helping them, but not kind of stepping in for them. Be mindful as senior year approaches that this can have a lot of pressure associated with it. Social, emotional, and academic pressures that are coming up. Some of your students have been at AMSA since 6th grade. This is a big change for them. They're going off somewhere where they may not know right away, but they're going to be going off somewhere and leaving AMSA. And so that can bring with it a lot of questions and a lot of emotional and social concerns. So just something to be aware of as well. And sometimes the pressure of students applying to colleges or getting into colleges, that in and of itself, hearing from their peers can also be a little bit of pressure for them as well, and keeping up their grades when they're applying and things like that. So just something to be really mindful that it brings up a lot of emotions. And then that wherever they end up getting into college and wherever they decide to go, that you're going to be there to support them and that you're going to be really proud of their choices no matter where they end up. That's really important as well. As far as logistics and helping with that, if you can support your students and getting them to college visits, even virtual visits, like somebody mentioned earlier, virtual visits are huge now with COVID. It's opened up a whole world of possibilities to be looking at colleges from across the country. So whether you can get on the campus when you can, or just doing virtual visits, that's wonderful. And kind of tracking with your student where they've done these visits, because especially if you're doing a lot of visits, sometimes it can be helpful to just make note of the things that they really loved about that campus, the things that, not so much, that they weren't so into, or that they have questions about, and kind of tracking some of that with them. Helping them to manage the financial aid process. That can be really confusing even for us as adults, so especially for students. So having that understanding by using things like the net price calculator, understanding sort of what that affordability is for you and your family and your student, meeting those deadlines, knowing when the deadlines are for the financial aid is very, very important. And then what forms are required. We won't get into all of that tonight, but there's different forms forms required for different colleges, and it's important that all of those forms are completed. So that's in the application process, as well as when they're getting those financial aid packages back. And we as your counselors are happy to sit down with you once you receive any of those financial aid packages back, to have a conversation about them if you have any questions about anything on those letters. But that'll be really important for you to work with your student on, and certainly incorporate us as much as you need to. The family questionnaire, we've got out to you. It's on Naviance. We'll make sure we remind you and send it out again. But when we write those letters of recommendations for your students, sometimes students have trouble coming up with things like, what have I accomplished? Or, what are my strengths? And so you're this other person that knows them so well that can really speak to those strengths and give us some idea of something that a student might not remember that they've accomplished throughout high school, or obstacles they've faced. We get a lot of information from some of those family questionnaires. So having that info is so important. And then we encourage your student to have a shareable system to keep track of some of this information, since there's so many deadlines and things like that. And using a Google Doc can be a way that you guys can share the process together. As far as helping students register for standardized tests, we encourage, I think Sarah said this earlier, we encourage all students to take the SATs or the ACTs, even if they end up going test optional, so that they have that option available. So if you can help them register for College Board or register for the tests, most will be on College Board, and we'll support them with that. As far as transportation to going to campuses whenever possible, and sending their scores and things like that directly from College Board or ACT. Also, not only keeping track of the students' deadlines for their colleges, applications and financial aid, but also AMSA will have some of their own deadlines. For instance, we require students, and we'll remind them a million times, don't worry, but we require our students to make sure that they tell us at least a month ahead of time that they request their letter of recommendation from us. Preferably, if they know they're going to, they could even do so, before the summer, if they know they're going to need one, but at least a month in advance. So just being aware of those deadlines, and again, we will remind them, we will include you in those as well, but just making sure they're meeting the AMSA deadlines that we put out there too, so that we can make the best application for them as possible, the best recommendation that we can. And then just helping them to track their decisions. Where are they getting in? What are their financial aid packages? And then certainly if there's any supplemental materials that need to be completed once they've made the decision, or getting their financial aid packages back, such as housing forms or committing to a college, or some colleges may also require verification of documents for financial aid and things like that, or if they're on a wait list. So those can all be ways that families can stay involved and connected with their students in the process.
All right, so we talked about how families can help the student navigating that process. We're going to move a little bit more towards kind of we and the counselors help out the students kind of on our end and what they can expect really over these next few months of their junior year and into senior year. So how we help, we obviously help them develop and hone that list, kind of again, as Ms. Crowley was just saying, both, you as a family, we help them do that as well. So if they want to sit down and kind of go over those probables versus reaches and targets, and what that looks like, and what tools they can utilize on Naviance to maybe kind of figure out which schools are targets for them, which are probable, which are reaches, which ones, I think it was mentioned earlier, a bunch of times, like, right, if they are interested in psychology or engineering or business, whatever the case may be, how they can utilize Naviance College Board to kind of figure out schools that are really good fits for them if they want that engineering school, or if they're looking for a really, a big school with a big athletic program, or a smaller school with kind of more intimate, teacher and classmate interactions. Helping also, again, facilitate the application process and acting as a resource, both through junior seminar and senior seminar. I'll get to, kind of that and what we cover very shortly. Part of that part of being a resource is writing a counselor letter. So just as we mentioned earlier, getting teacher recommendation letters, we write a letter as well. Talking again, focusing more on, kind of the overall bigger picture, whereas the teachers are focusing on that academics. We kind of look at the student as a whole holistically. I think kind of as we've also said, how colleges look at their students. We send the materials, so that counselor letter, the teacher letters, transcripts, all the other supporting documents that they need and that schools require. As I said, providing support in junior and senior seminar. Our role, what we do not do, we're not going to chase the students down. We're not going to badger them. We're not going to, micromanage, as Ms. Corello said. This is the student's car, right, per se. So they're the one in the driver's seats. We are kind of that passenger with them. We are cheering them on. We're supporting them. But they are the drivers. They're the leaders. They're the voice in this this process. So, if they have that November 1st and November 15th deadline for early action, like, that is the student's responsibility to come to us that month prior, not like, a week or a few days in advance, but like, hey, so I decided I want to apply for this deadline that's in 2 days. That's going to be really hard for us to turn around and get that letter. We do our best, obviously, and we try, but, we obviously can't guarantee that we can get a letter out in 2 days. So that's why we have those deadlines. Speaking of a junior seminar, some topics that we go over a lot. We try to touch on as much as we can to give them that overview. A lot of it we've honestly already talked about tonight. We'll go over the class overview, Naviance how-tos. Some of them kind of have a little bit of a background already. Some students are testing stuff out, and some it's kind of more of a refresher. There are questionnaires, there are tools in there that they can utilize. We go over SAT and ACT testing again, recommending again that at least sitting and taking the test for at least one time. Although schools are going test optional, it's good to at least have that rather than having to scramble at the last minute and saying like, oh, you know what, I think I want to boost my application with this test. Taking it earlier, getting it out of the way, gives them more flexibility. I'm always a huge proponent, as well as I know all the other counselors are, giving yourself as the student more flexibility. So you take it earlier, you at least have that test done so that you have the option of, hey, do I want to take it again or a second time? Or, am I comfortable with my scores this first time around? Finding your fit, as we have said, in like what you might be interested in. So if you know what you want to major in, great. How can we find and target those schools? If you're unsure, maybe then how do we gear and look at our college search for other interests that we have or things that we might that might be more of our fit, whether it's location wise, financially, et cetera, et cetera. College search tools kind of right there in what I just said as well, kind of how navigating the major, navigating where your fit is, navigating what you are interested in, organizations, clubs, extracurriculars, college application review process, like what that looks like for the student, what that looks like when they're submitting, what the next steps are, what that looks like, essays and examples of do's and don'ts. So as we mentioned as well, both the Common App essay, the college essay, and supplemental essays. It varies amongst the colleges, but we're happy to kind of go over those as well with the students, not just the regular college essay, but what a supplemental essay might look like and how they can kind of shape it, how they can vary it and differentiate it from that main college essay. Resumes, college visits, email etiquette. Again, some of the stuff we've touched on already, but a lot of this stuff that we've talked about tonight really is kind of what drives and what junior seminar centers around. And then in senior seminar, again, similar, but we kind of really dive deeper into it and get into that application process with the students. So we're going to, show them how to set up their Common App. Really, really simple, but we take them step by step. We'll provide a video as well. So if they need to kind of look back later on, how to make that account, how to find their supplemental essays in the Common App, because they can be kind of hidden amongst the colleges. So where to look for those, how to navigate them, how to, find them and really kind of, edit them or revise them, how to really not grasp, craft, there we go, craft a really good essay. How and when to send those SAT scores. So after you've taken them, okay, how do I send them? Where do I send them? What does that look like? Because again, the navigating what the student's responsibility is versus what's ours. For example, the SAT scores is something that the student sends through College Board, so how they can log in and do that. A lot of them are simple processes. It's just a matter of kind of pointing out where those tools are, how they can do them, when they should do them, all that. Financial aid, we get a lot of questions on that, of course. The biggest piece that we kind of overview with our students is what the important things are to fill out. So the FAFSA and the CSS. The FSA ID is part of the FAFSA that you and your student create. It's required for pretty much all the schools. The CSS profile is more school specific, so a lot of schools do require it, but we tell the student to look into their list of schools and see if their school requires it. It's a little bit more in depth than the FAFSA, but not every school requires it. Scholarships, along with that, financial aid scholarships, again, it's never too early. Students can start looking now, but we'll kind of go over with them where they can look, details of what to look for, the important things, especially that, don't pay for a scholarship. A scholarship, that's the whole point of a scholarship. You don't want to be giving, paying to apply or, giving very sensitive information. Give them senior seminars, a time for them to work on their applications, to going back to kind of one of the first slides that I was talking about, using us as a resource. So one of us, if not a few of us, or a couple of us rather, are usually there in senior seminars with the students. So that's an opportunity for them as well to kind of come and talk to us and ask us questions there. Most lessons, there is, at least 10, 15 minutes for them to kind of, access us and ask us questions. So always another opportunity for them to come and talk to us. And it's, another resource for us as well to kind of give them those reminders and give them those deadlines, because, a nice friendly reminder doesn't hurt. It's, more beneficial to over give those reminders than not. So yeah, that's, I think Miss Driver, added in that, the junior year packet. I think it also gives an overview of both what junior seminar looks like and what they can kind of expect for senior seminar. I believe that was shared in the chat earlier, so you can take a look at that as well. And then the junior year focus, again, I think I touched on a lot of this as well, but it's the junior year focus to wrap up and kind of give a big review or a small review of a lot of the stuff that we have went over today. The junior year focus really is kind of developing that college list. What that college list looks like, or even I should say, I forgot to mention this in the senior seminar, but I think Ms. Morrissey mentioned at the very beginning, right? Like sometimes students, they might want to be going to college or know that they go into college, but they're thinking, you know what, I think I might want to take a gap year, or are thinking of other things besides college. So what that college list and or your post AMSA list looks like, that's something we want the students to start thinking about now and have those conversations, with you or with us. We are, as has been said, like we're all a team, so we want to be able to support your student as best we can. Schoolwork and strong grades, obviously, they've heard that, I think, throughout their academic careers. There's just the one other thing on that I would point out or touch on is, I've gotten this question a lot so far. I'm sure all the other counselors have as well, where, if a student struggles, they're like, oh my gosh, I got a C or C minus, or I failed this test. Like, what is that going to affect my college eligibility and application? colleges are not going to, you know, look at a student and be like, oh, you have a C in this this one course, whereas all the other stuff, you're, you know, you're an AB student. They realize that we're all human, right? And some subjects are strong points, some aren't, or there might have been just anything else going on right in the student's life where they had a rough term, and then that's okay. So I always just want to put that out there as well, that, you know, one bad grade, one bad term is not going to ruin college eligibility for you. You know, participate in meaningful activities. A lot of students that I've talked to already are involved in a lot of different clubs, sports, activities. Finding those activities that are really, really meaningful to you. It's great to have a huge long list, but my recommendation, and I think I'm guessing, I don't want to speak for all the other counselors, but I think they would probably say as well, like, it's better to have those meaningful ones than a long list of like, I'm in 20 activities and 20 clubs here at AMSA. Like, the more that you can kind of say how much they mean to you and talk on your activity and your level of involvement in them, that's probably the better way to go. Again, building relationships with those teachers to figure out who you might want to have write that recommendation letter for you. Building the relationship with your counselor, so that we get to know you. We can really personalize those letters, and kind of, you know, again, make you stand out. We want to make you all pop as students. So the more that you can, you know, that we know you, and the better we know you, the more we can do that. Creating a testing plan for those standardized tests, getting a resume going, and kind of, you know, what the activities, again, you are involved in extracurricularly in school, sports, work, et cetera, and engaging with your counselor when picking classes. That's right around the corner, as crazy as that sounds, but, you know, really kind of identifying if you have a major that you're interested in, like, okay, what classes next year in my senior year can kind of help me towards that? Or again, on the other end, like, if you're unsure, what gives me, you know, a variety of different classes outside of what I need to take next year? What gives me a variety that I can maybe kind of dip my toe in and, you know, find out like, oh, hey, I actually really like, you know, the arts, or I like science, or I like English. So building that together, putting that all together, and again, making those things your focus for it this year. The next slide is going to have all our information on it. But before we wrap up, I think Ms. Driver has a few final tidbits she wants to kind of add in.
Oh, thank you. So our contact info is there. It's on the website. I'm going to pop two things in the chat. Okay, I've just popped two things in the chat. The first is a feedback form. If you wouldn't mind taking just a minute or two to fill that out, that would be fantastic. The other is a more mental health related resource. I told myself that every time I was in a room with parents this year, I was going to try to remember to mention the Interface Referral Service. So we have a partnership with Interface. They are based out of William James College. One of the things that we hear the most often is that it can be really challenging to find a therapist. So with Interface, you'll get to work with a referral counselor who will provide you with matches based on your student's needs, your insurance, timing, whether they want to meet in person or if they're still okay with virtual. So that is a resource that we think is really helpful. They can usually come up with matches within a week or two, and they will work with you throughout the process. So please consider taking advantage of the Interface Referral Service if you feel like your student has some mental health challenges that need attention and perhaps outside counseling. We also, encourage you to communicate with us. We are talking about college tonight, but mental health is always at the forefront of all of our minds, and it really is our focus. I think many of us consider ourselves mental health professionals first, and that college and career work is an important part of our job, but our kids need to be healthy for them to succeed. And so we put health and mental health above all in what we do. So you can check that link out, fill out the feedback form, and we are happy to take questions. You're welcome to unmute yourself, or you can pop your questions in the chat and we will answer them for you. We will also send out a recording, all the links that I put in the chat, and a copy of the presentation and a copy of the junior packet to all of you within a couple of days. soon as we get stuff into YouTube. So, any questions? I know you're all like furiously typing, so I'll wait. All right, I don't see any questions yet. So, yes, so all of the information will be posted. I'll send out an email with it, and you'll have the whole recording as well. So if you want to go back and see the beginning. Junior seminar will start in January, and we meet with students just about once out of the 8-day cycle. It's not kind of exactly that, but a ballpark. And we definitely, we enjoy that time with the juniors, and it's really helpful. It helps us get to know them and walk them through the process. Great question. What do we do to help those who don't know what they want to do? We have a lot of resources. We have a lot of resources that we can hook students up with in terms of interest inventories, career assessments, if they want to play around and begin to figure out what careers or majors might be a match for their interests and aptitudes. But I think really just getting to know students and have conversations with them about what they like and how they like to spend their time, that can be really helpful. We also know that many students go to college undecided, and that is a very valid path. So, we may know that a student's interested in humanities, and we might be able to recommend some great colleges that have a lot of different humanities majors that they don't have to declare until their sophomore year. So there are definitely lots of options for students who are still feeling pretty undecided and maybe unsure of what their path may be. Is the student the only one who has? I'm just talking because I'm unmuted, and I figure I may as well just answer questions. But anyone else is welcome to jump in. Is the student the only one who has a Naviance account? Parents will have access. We are working on getting students in right now, and then we will send parents an activation code. You will have view-only access as a parent. You can't edit anything. And you won't have access to some of their journal entries or whatever, but you'll be able to use the tools that they have access to and see some of what they're up to. So that's cool. Good questions. Other questions? Other comments from the counselors? Thank you. Yes, thank you all for coming and for letting us, spend time with your students. It's always wonderful. I've been getting to see all the juniors this week while our other counselors are working with 9th graders. It's been a lot of fun. Some classes do have the essay as a summer assignment. I believe Contemporary and Gothic both have the college essay as a senior summer assignment. Our AP class does not touch college essays, nor does our Shakespeare class, but students who are in those classes often still ask their English teachers to read their essays, and they're typically happy to do it with a little bit of advance notice. But their content just doesn't necessarily lend itself quite as well to looping in a college essay. So Gothic or Contemporary are the places where that's most likely to happen. Thank you so much for coming.